Facilities Subcommittee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order on March 12, 2020, in response to the COVID pandemic, and enacted into law by Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and the provisions extended through March 31st, 2025 by fiscal year 2023 supplemental budget signed by Governor Healy on March 29th, 2023. These provisions suspend the requirement for an open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Furthermore, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee Facility Subcommittee on Friday, September 13th at 11:05 a.m. I am Matthew Landers, the chair of the Facility Subcommittee. I'd like to confirm that all members of the persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Narissa?
I'm here and I can hear you.
And staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Superintendent Forget?
Here and I can hear you.
Brian Perry?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Sorry, John Skloki?
Here and I can hear you.
Totally butchered that, sorry.
Sorry.
Alan?
Did you say me?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I am here and I can hear you. Yes.
Principal Kelly?
I'm here and I can hear you.
I think I got everyone, right? Did I?
That's it for, I don't know if you want the
Do I need-
town officials, Mike, Christine.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, Mike Colburn?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Christine?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Tracy Blaze?
Here for Alicia, and I can hear everybody.
Right.
Okay. For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is conveying remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website, identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that the others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the district website with the agenda posting, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Do we have anyone from the public? Do I need to do the public comment guidelines
Nope.
technically? Okay.
No one here.
All right. So the first item on the agenda is the minutes approval.
I'll make
Can I get a motion?
Oh, yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Facilities Subcommittee held on August 16th, 2024.
Okay. Second, sorry. And roll call vote, Narissa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
It does feel like you're talking to yourself when there's only two members.
Yeah, it does. And then the first item is the continuing the discussion on the building options.
Yeah, so we didn't confirm, but Kevin, you can hear us, right? And we can hear you. So
Yes, I can hear.
all right. So again, last time when we met, we started to get, we've done the work to say, okay, here's what the possibilities are. We've done the work to see what the possibilities could be as far as structurally. And again, our purpose here is having an alternative path, depending on what the MSBA says. The MSBA welcomes us in and we accept. We have no choice but to follow their process, study every possible option, go through the whole process. If we hear no, then our goal here is finding an alternative, because what we've said is we don't have time. This building has severe needs that need to be addressed sooner rather than later. And we'll keep saying this, maybe our plan B becomes so attractive that it's easier to forego partnering with the MSBA. And even if we get welcomed in, we decide that we want to move forward with a plan that allows us to, bad pun intended, drive the bus more than we are able to with the MSBA. So last time we started to this exciting work of, okay, what are the problems we want to solve outside of the obvious, right? We don't need to talk about building envelope and sometimes more water in the building than outside the building. All of those issues, yes, we need to check that box and fix those. But if we're looking at a renovation and repair project, what are the other things about this building that we don't like, that don't work for the educational program, that don't work from an operational standpoint, that isn't efficient? So we started to have those conversations last time, charged Kevin with coming back with some, I think you called them big block ideas, Kevin, just some kind of
Yes.
conceptual ideas of how we could solve those problems. And that's where we are today. So this isn't anything close to a finished idea, but Kevin has for us some ideas of how we might be able to realistically solve those problems and address the issues. So with that, Kevin.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody. So just to follow up on what Brian has said, I mean, I think we're trying to take some of the ideas and some of the issues that were discussed at our meeting last week and look at the existing building and try to come up with some thoughts on how we could rearrange things using the spaces that we have and maybe gain some efficiencies and address some of the needs. And so we've got a couple options to show in plan diagram form. So I'm gonna do a screen share, but it looks like I need to have that enabled by the host.
Yep.
To do the screen share.
So hang on one second.
Yep.
All right, you should be able to now.
Okay, you should see the screen share now.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, I'm just gonna rearrange a couple things here on my desktop so I can see everybody. It's a big group.
Yeah.
Okay,
Last thing they haven't figured out in Zoom
All
is
right.
when presenting, how to also be able to see the people you're presenting to.
yeah. Well, I have two monitors, so that helps a lot.
Okay.
So what you're going to see are some plan views of two options that we had developed, and the format is very similar to what you've seen before in the space needs assessment. So I'll just flip back to that very quickly. So you might remember the space needs assessment that we talked about at our last meeting, where we identified the use of each and every space in the facility, and then did a review on how those spaces compared with the MSBA standards, and I think you might recall the overall conclusions was that there was excess capacity in the school based on those guidelines, and we also found that some of the spaces were oversized, and the library in particular comes to mind, which was grossly oversized by the MSBA's standard for high school. So thinking about those things and the comments that we heard last week, we've come up with some ideas about how we could potentially rearrange things and also address entry. So the courtyard, you might recall, is in this area here, right here. The middle school is down here. And our main entrance to the school is tucked around the corner somewhere in this area, right here. And so the building really does not present itself well to the road for pickup and drop off, and for entry, I think in general. So we started to think about how we could address that. How could we provide a secure entrance, and how could we rearrange things so that members of the public who will visit this facility, other than the students, what spaces could they potentially get access to for events that might be occurring after hours? If there's something in the auditorium, there's an athletic event in the gymnasium, Perhaps there's an art show or a music performance or a theatrical performance. How could we limit the access to those elements that the public would need to see and provide a secure boundary for the remainder of the school? So there's a line here that you'll see that comes around like this that suggests, what that boundary might be. So in this option, what's been suggested here is that courtyard area could potentially be captured as indoor space, and that would require some new construction, clearly, to put a roof over that area. But it could provide a very generous area, for entry, and also provide an area for informal events, socialization. I could imagine, loose tables and chairs, perhaps, and maybe even some limited food service in this area. So we've called that the Commons. You would enter the Commons through a secure vestibule here, which is close to the drop-off road. And then there are some spaces that have been displaced by some of the other elements here that we've suggested, particularly administrative offices. And so we would need to find new homes for those, which we've placed here in the new common areas, which is in the general area near the main administration office, which is right here. The other major element that we've suggested could go in this area is the media center. And this would replace the current library facility. And it would only be as big as it needs to be. So this area right here represents probably a third of the area that's currently devoted to the library, so much more modest in size. And then some of the other elements that might be considered for an area like this are a spirit shop, where like the school store, where we might sell t-shirts and hats, and potentially even a small concessions for events, game in the gymnasium, event in the auditorium, and so forth. So if the library could be relocated and downsized and placed in this area, that frees up an area here. At this level, we're really only looking at the top part of the library. So you'll recall that, we in the corridor, we can look down into the library. So the current library is a double height space. So there's a lot of volume there that really isn't, efficiently utilized. And so the thought here is that volume could be reclaimed, and you could put a floor in here to recover that area and add that area to the main level. So that's capturing some potential floor area that's already within the building envelope that we could reuse for something else. And then thinking about a theater program, the current auditorium really isn't configured for a full-scale theatrical program. Lacks a scene shop, lacks dressing areas, storage areas for props, and so forth. So there was some thought here about potentially expanding a theater arts program, which could include a scene shop located here in the upper half of where the library was. And the scene shop needs to be immediately adjacent to the stage so that props and scenery, lighting, and so forth can be moved in and out between the shop and the auditorium. The stage is down at this end. And then across the corridor here, an area devoted here for a theater arts program, which would have those other elements like rehearsal spaces, green rooms, and so forth. So that got us thinking about trying to create a cluster of arts arts and technology and making. So the art rooms we've suggested could potentially be located back over in this area. This is the north side of the building. And this is a bit more area, I think, that the art program occupies currently. But you'll notice that it faces north. And so north light is really, preferred for an art studio. And I think that would really improve, the quality of the studio spaces if they could potentially be relocated, and they would have access to a shop, as well as potentially a maker space down here adjacent to the shop. So the shop kind of is the node here of this area, and the shop could potentially be used by all of these programs, by the art program, by makerspace, potentially a technology lab, and so forth. So we know that the library, the main level of the library, is downstairs. So what happens downstairs? So we can take a look at that. So there's quite a bit of area here. If the media program was downsized, that could be repurposed for something else. And so in the main area of the library, which is right here, there's an opportunity here to have potentially another space for assembly purposes. So if there was a small scale event, Brian, I think you had mentioned potentially having, if to have an elementary school, performance or something, or a small assembly, that really is not something that's going to fill up the auditorium. This is another option, to do something like that. And then the boundary, indicates that this is a place that members of the public, parents in particular, might access. And so we would just need to think about, security and trying to arrange things so that people aren't, sort of wandering throughout the facility. And then there was some thought here about potentially a media arts program, the journalism, and a broadcast studio potentially for production of video and audio segments where recording could take place. And then here, suggestion was to consider, putting a technology lab down here. So that would
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So that you have it as multi-purpose assembly.
Mhm.
So as far as the layout, and I'm sorry if I missed this, is there, as far as furniture and fit and finish, is it largely an open space? So
Yeah.
I'm thinking like for at the high school, sometimes when on the worst of days, when there's lots of teachers absent, oftentimes the library space is used for a study when we don't have enough subs to cover. It's not ideal, but it's a reality we have to deal with. And could that be a space that could be used for that as well? Is it like that versatile? Is that what you envision?
Yeah,
it?
I think the intent would be that it's very flexible.
Okay.
And could be reconfigured as needed,
Mhm.
depending on what types of events. It could be used for a study hall. It could be used for an assembly or a small performance, maybe even a music recital, something like that.
Great.
One thing I do want to point out, which I neglected to mention, is the shop space is on I'll call it the middle level or the main level of the school. But the loading areas are downstairs, down in this area here. So that creates a challenge for getting material, to the shop, right? Because we're talking about, potentially a large set piece, building materials, whatever might be needed to supply the shop. We need a way to get that material there, and there's no immediate way to do that. And so we would suggest that a freight elevator could potentially be added right here, which is just a short distance down the corridor here from the loading areas, which are here in the back near the cafeteria.
And that would have pretty quick access to the, what do you call it? The scene shop?
Yeah,
So that shop area that would have.
it would be right across from the scene shop.
All right.
Okay, so those are some sort of big ideas. These are high level ideas. And there's another option that I can go through.
Maybe
which
we
I
pause and see if there's
show you
questions
now,
on
or
this.
we can do
Yeah.
that too. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so one more question I have. So on the new admin in the Commons, does that replace, just to the right of that is the admin, and that's the high school admin and the central office administration? Does that replace any of that, or is
No,
that?
it's supplemental to
Okay.
that, because I believe there's some additional offices in this area
Guidance is there, yeah.
and some offices in this area here.
That's art, so straight across the
I think it
that
was
admin space. Yeah, those are all art rooms down through there.
Brian, he's talking about the nurse's office.
And the nurse, yeah, sorry. Yep, you're right. That pink there is the nurse.
So we're looking at this
Yeah.
and this, and so some of the, the layouts here that we're suggesting would displace these
Gotcha.
offices, and so we want to make sure that we don't lose them and that we have a new home. And so they were pushed out into this area here.
And then one more question, and I'm sure other people have
Yeah.
questions.
Of course.
So the Commons then, the Commons does not become the dining commons. That's just a general gathering vestibule, if you will.
Yeah, it's it would be on a large scale though. It would be really more of a large lobby or a gathering space. And, we really thought quite a lot about bringing the dining services up into this area. And I think there's some very challenging logistics with doing that.
Yeah.
The idea is very compelling
Mhm.
of having a dining commons, right at the main entry to the school. And there are a lot of schools that have adopted this model, and I happen to like it very much. I think our challenge is if we look at,
Mhm.
I'm going to go back to the space needs assessment here for a minute. And so our current cafeteria is here and the kitchen is here right behind it, but this is on the lower level
Mhm.
at grade.
Mhm.
And so all of the loading, that we need, and there's a lot of loading activity for a kitchen. It's all down here. And then there's also a lot of utilities that are required to run a kitchen. There's gas, there's water, there's grease, and so there's a drain, for that function out here on the site that already. All of that stuff is fairly expensive to
Mhm.
relocate.
Mhm.
And considering that the utilities are already located down here, I think that would be a challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
And would be probably cost prohibitive.
Mhm.
But we had another thought on that, which I can show you in another option. So we
Okay.
can go back to the first one, and maybe if there are other comments or questions on this one, we can talk about that.
My only question is, what would the new library be, square footage wise?
We would target the MSBA number, which I think was 3,600 square feet.
And that would be just for the high school, or would the middle school share that?
That would be the high school only. We could potentially combine them. There's certainly plenty of room to do that, but the standard here for high school is 3,650 square feet and 2,680 for a middle school. So you might remember that the middle school library here is very undersized, and the high school library is grossly oversized. So we could potentially combine these two into a single media center, which would be, approximately that.
I don't want to speak for Al, but I would say if we're looking at something like this, having a combined media center library would make sense to me.
And I think there's also space, right? And that could be a programming decision down the road. I think there would also potentially be space to capture a couple connected rooms where the current library is, which is a large classroom, and make a separate, if that was determined as we went through this process. I think that could be, right, if that became the high school and then it was determined that the middle school made a lot of sense to keep separate, I think those could both be accomplished in this plan. But I do agree. I think there's, where there can be efficiencies, the only question becomes the scheduling of, and if that's going to be a high frequency, high use space. I think the gyms, we have two separate, and those make sense because they're high use. Cafeteria, we work around. Auditorium is not high use. I just worry about if the library is high use by both schools, then that could be problematic, but certainly something to consider. I think there's a solution down the road for both of those in this idea.
Yeah, I agree. Something else which I'll point out too, on a different topic, which I've just noticed is, access to the gym and the middle school gym in particular. Currently, it's a long walk, right, to get there because we have to come all the way around like this. If we were able to capture some of this courtyard space as an indoor space, you could potentially leave the middle school here and just come right across the commons to access the gym, which I think would be, very convenient.
I've always loved that idea of that commons being dining. With this,
Me too.
the more you talk about it, I think there's the cost prohibitive piece, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think then the loading alone would be problematic in that our only loading spot would be the front of the building. But I actually really like it as a commons for that, like you just said, that connectedness between the middle school and those shared spaces makes a lot of sense.
It really gathers things
Yeah.
together in
Yeah.
a way that's not possible right now, which I think makes it an appealing idea. I mean, there's certainly costs associated with doing this because we're taking outdoor space and we're making it indoor space.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Brian, refresh my memory. What is currently housed where the proposed art rooms are? I can't remember.
Where the proposed that's, yeah.
Those music rooms?
So there's a music room on the end of the hall right there. And then our theater room is right next to it. Our TLC room, which is for students with more significant disabilities, there. And then lastly, it's an academic support room.
Okay, thank you. I just couldn't remember. I know there had been changes over the years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the two yellow rooms are special education.
Okay.
But good question, Chris. And I think those ultimately would be able to be reworked into the rest of the square footage.
Yes.
The fact that,
Yeah.
on paper, we have something to the 80 to 90,000 more square feet than the MSBA formula would say we need. So.
Right, exactly right. And, we don't have a solution for each and every space today, but you're certainly right that, if we move the art program over here, well, we're displacing other program here, and where does that go? And we would have to find solutions for all of that.
The TLC program, so the first yellow space, or the yellow space in the middle, sorry, would be a priority, needing a space big enough for that cohort of students, and a space, ideally that would be a space that is accessible because of some mobility issues, and wanting to make sure that it has functionality year round because we run summer programming out of there. So all those things, when we would be identifying another space in the building, would be important.
Got it. Okay.
Other questions before Kevin goes on? I think we're just unmuting and calling out at this point.
I have a few if I could. So one of my questions is about flow, Kevin. Can you just talk about, I'm just picturing sort of the different ways that we have people entering the building. So in the morning, obviously coming off a bus, would you have high school students entering through the commons and then the middle school students still entering through the middle school? Or would the middle school entrance effectively go away? Because if they all come through the commons, it looks like it's a extensive walk for them to be able to get into the middle school.
Yeah, can you remind me how it works now? Or the middle school students
So,
use the entrance
Right
down
where
here?
you're, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
That is the middle school entrance.
I don't see any reason to change that. From my perspective, I mean, I think that the high school can enter here and middle school can enter where they're currently entering.
Okay, so and then all visitors you'd expect to come in through that security station that's shown in the bottom left,
Correct.
regardless of where they're going in the building.
Right, so this would provide a secure access point with a vestibule where somebody would have to wait until, they were identified and granted access, and then there could be a security desk right here where somebody is badged in. So all of that can happen potentially outside of, the administrative offices to bring somebody into the facility.
Okay,
My preference would be having everyone come in through the commons area.
You saying middle school and high school?
Yeah, because I disagree, Nursa. I don't think it's a long walk because there's stairs right where his mouse is right now. To go upstairs, I think you're a 30-second walk from the commons area to just about anywhere in the middle school, which is the same distance, if not less, as where they would be heading in the high school. But having a common point that has a security station and a vestibule as the entrance point, and for expectations for any visitor coming on campus to go through that vestibule and to have it built out in a way that makes sense, I think is something that should be an important change. My question around traffic, around flow in the building, is more the backside of the, or the backside of the auditorium where the makerspace and scene shop now are. Is having students walking all the way around the auditorium to get to those theater and art classes, that feels like there's not an easy access point to those spots in the building.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's something we struggle with also, because there's currently a corridor right here.
Yeah.
Right, which gives you that access to the other side.
can I
think
just stop you for 1 second? So I just wanted to go back to the comment I made before. So is there at the bottom, kind of right next to the admin, is there remaining a corridor pass through that's somewhere in by the bathrooms that are right there?
yes,
There
yes.
are, okay, there is. Okay, it's not.
There would be access
tell.
from the middle school directly to the commons.
Okay.
And the details of how that works is something we would do at a later time. I do believe that there's another corridor right here.
Okay.
And there's a stair right here.
While we're sticking on that corridor, that commons discussion, I love the idea of bringing everyone through a common space for security. If we leave the middle school entrance as it is, it will appear to be an entrance and people will wander around outside. If there was a way that we could move administration, right, the top of your screen now where it says admin, that's the high school and the central office, and then middle school admin is down by the middle school entrance. If there's a way to centralize that, even having to capture a courtyard if we needed to right there, so that when people are coming to central office, they don't need to go through any of the schools. Be great to be able to have, you can come into the commons, you can get into the high school, you can get into the middle school, or you can go directly to the superintendent's office without having to find your way in. So again, big concept. I think that would be something I would say is I would love to have that be a single point of, right? It's a single point of failure. It's a single point of access, from a safety perspective.
Yep.
that would be something important to me from a kind of a campus management perspective.
Agree. There's definitely some advantages to doing that. But I
And
wanted
back to the conversation
Yeah.
Patrick raised and Narissa was going to ask,
Yeah.
or that Narissa was going back to the other, the blue, what you call a workshop? Yeah, the workshop and the orange makerspace. Could you carve up? Could you carve out a corridor between those two spaces?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think that circulation issue is something that we struggle with as well. I think we would all want to maintain, that the corridor that's there.
Yeah.
But I think that if you did have a scene shop, and you did expand, the theater program, I think that you would want one. You could locate it across a corridor, but there's a congestion point there where if you're moving set pieces or equipment from the shop to the stage, and I mean I was involved with the theater program when I was in college, and there's a lot of activity that's happening around a stage when you're getting ready for a production. And I think it's something that you typically try to avoid, is to having to use corridors in order to move stuff around. So a shop really wants to be directly adjacent to the stage so that you can have an opening somewhere backstage, and you can do that. But the way things are laid out, it creates some challenges for moving people around the rest of the facility. And I think one way to address that is you could certainly have another corridor right here, which I think would help. Ideally, even this part here would be also directly adjacent to the stage. So, actors are in a green room waiting for their scene, and they would want to access the stage directly as well. But this is somewhat easier to manage when there's a corridor.
All right, other questions on, and again, we're talking big bucket, big block concepts. So are there other, as far as this
I'm
as a
assuming on
concept?
the backside of the middle school gym, all that space that's currently weight room, wrestling room, locker rooms, that's all still untouched?
In this scheme, yeah, that
Okay.
wouldn't be that wouldn't be touched.
Great, thank you.
And there's a bit of a theme which I think we'll see again in the next option that creates a focus on the arts here around the middle area of the school, which aligns with public access, so that I think it would provide some more opportunities for an art display, musical performance. I think if it's possible to group those things around that area that the public can access, I think it really gives you some opportunities for showcasing student work and seeing what's going on. We want to take a look at another option?
Can I ask actually two more questions?
Yeah, sure.
One is just, I'm sure this is something you thought through, but it feels like a scene shop would be one of the noisiest places in the school. Is there really good technology as far as mitigating the effect that noise would have on the other activities that are happening in the area?
Yeah, there's certainly some soundproofing that we could apply around the perimeter of the shop, but I think where it's just by virtue of its location, I think will help with noise control quite a bit, because it would have corridors on either side and a stage on this side, and then the maker space is likely also to be, could be a noisy space as well. Perhaps less concern about noise in a space like a maker space or a tech lab. So I think just by virtue of its location, I think you'd be able to control that.
And my other question was, I know we had extensive conversation about science labs last time. I know this is big block, but was your thought just we're sort of moving walls or something like that in the high school and middle school rather than repurposing space to get some additional spaces in those? Or does this just not address the science lab space issue?
We didn't address it directly, but I think the general thought is that the science labs really need all of the utilities that go with labs. And I think it would be somewhat costly to relocate those things, and we could certainly do that. But let's take a look at the labs. I think we're downstairs.
Right there.
Yeah. Yeah, the labs are down here. So we haven't addressed that directly in this exercise, but I think the notion was to try to find some way to expand some of the teaching spaces, but keep it in this general area so that we would not have to reconfigure, the utilities. And we would want to be mindful of the prep rooms also in between, for prep for classroom work and for chemical storage and things like that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess one last question.
Yep.
Shocking, Brian's talking the most. So on the new concept for where again, the admin to the right of the commons is half high school, half district office. Does the courtyard, is it cost prohibitive to capture some courtyard space? I know courtyard space is important for outside light for landlocked rooms. But for example, in that big X courtyard to the right of the commons, could half of that, right? If I take roughly the same size as the high school and central office, could you keep the high school where it is, put central office kind of right below it in the courtyard, and you still have half the courtyard left for outside space, and then you've got natural light coming in from the commons, Is that generally speaking feasible?
You could do that, but I think that we would have some challenges with providing windows and light to private offices, because we can really only use the edges of this space for that purpose. So that if we were to come in here and let's say we expanded, is this something like what you were suggesting?
I was thinking the other side, but yes, that.
Yeah, the other side. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is a little bit more interesting because we would have an outside wall here where we can have windows. And on this side, even though this is an indoor space, one of the thoughts we had about this commons is we could make the roof height virtually anything that we want to. And if we can raise the roof a little bit higher, we could create what we call a clear story, which is a band of glazing that goes around the top part of the wall. And it's something that you'll see in a lot of, gymnasiums. You'll see that where there's just a band of glazing, and it doesn't even have to be transparent. A lot of times it's translucent. And what that allows you to do is you can borrow daylight from an interior space, so that if there was a row of offices right here, for example, Brian, that we could potentially design this commons area to bring some natural light in from the top, right? And then borrow that light, we call it borrowed light, for some offices that might be along this edge. I'm pointing at my own screen here, and I know you can't see that, so I'll try to use
following you.
Yeah. And I think that would improve the overall, quality of that space as well, as to bring, because it's fairly deep. And if we can bring some light in from the top, I wouldn't recommend skylights. I know everyone loves them, but
no,
they leak And
We are anti-skylight squarely.
yeah, well, yeah, it's not surprising. Uh, Great for daylighting, but eventually they'll leak. So, but a clear story lighting is different, right? Because it's really a band of windows.
One last question. I
Yep.
know I said that already. So that front, all along the front of the commons, as a general rule, I imagine glazing, again, windows,
Yep.
floor to ceiling is cost prohibitive compared to cinder block brick construction. Or can it be relatively neutral, meaning that if the whole front was glass, it lets even more natural light in? Or does that usually come at a premium?
We were thinking that we would provide as much glass as possible, if not all glass.
Okay.
In that area.
Mhm.
And I think it's a relatively, for a large scale project like what we're talking about, it's really a relatively small area to have some extra glazing. And I think it really helps to identify where the entrance is. If you're
Yeah.
approaching the site, you don't know it. If you're approaching in the evening, it would be lit up, and it would be, obvious where, you're supposed to enter.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Just one point on,
that's
Brian,
good.
where you look to move the offices that's in red now. That would also limit windows on 2 of the middle school classrooms that we
Yep.
have currently. I'm just looking out my window at them.
Yeah, that's a good
Right.
point.
And that
Right
takes
here.
away their windows, and I wouldn't want to have classrooms that are
Yeah.
windowless.
Yeah, it's
True.
a good point. I would agree. I
Could you
think
put those classrooms where the middle school admin offices are now, though?
If you captured, yeah, like so that
Yeah, isn't that? Let me just go
that
back to my.
whole kind of if you captured that, what you had that space up there, but then put those 2 classrooms. Okay, now I'm pointing at my screen. The entrance is now bottom right of the corner of your screen, Kevin. And could those, that's the
Right there,
entrance.
yeah.
Just to the left, that's another administrative suite.
Yep.
So could that space be repurposed as the 2 classrooms? And then
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
I'm thinking, Brian, that the area that's on the end of the middle school hallway, all the way over to the left, next to where we're adding offices, where the entrance area is. So we've got 2 bathrooms there, and then a stairwell and classrooms. Like, you could convert that into an admin area, and then switch out the middle school office to be classroom spaces.
Yeah, Patrick, I think that was at least our intent for having an additional administrative office area here is that you could potentially locate from here to here for the middle school. And then you're more in a more central location, and it allows a visitor, if we're going to go with one single entrance for the entire facility, it allows a visitor to go right to the middle school office. It's right there.
I got
So
a quick question,
Go ahead, Mike.
Ryan. When we enter the commons, if we do all the extra glazing, is there possible to put vegetation in there to help with, calming as you come into the building, to help subconsciously to calm people down, with maybe a little water feature with some vegetation?
So in some indoor features, yeah.
Yeah,
You could, absolutely.
with all that extra glass, it would grow, and it would be actually, a good thing for a calming mechanism coming into school.
I like that.
Nice idea.
You get the credit for the idea, so it can be the
Well, I am a landscape designer, Brian.
That's right. So I like your thinking. I might just go sit out by the trees when I need a moment.
Yeah.
All right.
I think
So
everyone in the school would like that.
Exactly. So as far as big block ideas, everything we're talking about, Kevin, conceptually is doable. Right? There's nothing here we've talked about that sounds like it's not.
Yeah, I don't think there's any obvious reasons why any of these things couldn't work. It's just a question of doing the next level of investigation.
Yeah.
you know, all of the work that follows.
Did you have another option for us?
We did. Oh, was somebody have a question?
No, I think that's that's a
Oh,
intercom
okay.
on the radio, or it's someone's.
Okay, so this idea is a bit more, I'll call it aggressive. Because there's a pretty significant departure here, and if you haven't noticed it already, I'll point it out. But this idea was to remove the existing caf and kitchen and try to make the layout of the school more compact and improve the flow throughout the school. And make the cafeteria perhaps less remote. So you know, the entry is much like the previous, you know, version, but I think in this version, the area of the commons is reduced, which I still think is it's a very generous area. It's still a large area, but not quite as expansive. And that's because in this option, the exterior wall is pulled back. So this is the corner of the middle school building right here. So it would be roughly where that is. And it still leaves a small courtyard here right in front, which is still desirable, I think, as a, you know, as a waiting area and as a gathering area, to have some horizontal surface that's outside that's bigger than a sidewalk. So this idea, I think, also has some appeal. It would still include a security vestibule. It would still include some relocated administrative offices, including potentially middle school offices, you know, moving over to this general area here. But all this would take place under a roof, a new roof, creating some indoor space, much like the version that we saw before. Media center, you know, that idea hadn't changed too much here. But I think some of the big ideas here that are different would be instead of having an expanded you know, theater program that involved building a shop and repurposing some space for theater arts at this level, the volume that we have to work with, if we're able to relocate the library, the volume that's left over by the current library, I think could potentially be used as a black box theater. And that is something that can function independently of the auditorium. And you know, they would, I think we would really want that corridor, though, to be back in this area here. So it's not represented quite right, but we can do that. We can leave that corridor intact, you know, keep the existing flow, captures that volume of that library, and have the theater there and have it a black box theater. Is everybody familiar with the concept of a black box theater?
My guess is no. Want to just give like a
So it's
30
not
second.
it's not a traditional arrangement where there's a you know, rows of fixed seating, a stage, and a proscenium, right? So that's what we have in the auditorium. That's a traditional arrangement for a theater. A black box theater is it's kind of self-descriptive. It's four walls, a floor, and a ceiling, and it can be configured in virtually any way imaginable. So it's highly flexible. They're typically smaller than a full-scale theater or an auditorium. It's a little bit more intimate. Doesn't require a lot of set pieces or lighting. It's flexible, and you can do virtually anything in there, from a simple, a recital, a poetry reading. It could be used for small musical performance. And then with some loose seating, it can also be used for, a play or a theatrical production. Typically, it might not have a shop, so there's a lot of resources that go into, building and managing and maintaining a shop. So it's just a smaller, a more modest approach to, maybe expanding the theater program. And then sticking with the theme of trying to, group the arts here around the middle. Here are those art rooms that we talked about earlier, potentially being on the north side, getting some better lighting quality and some more room. This displaces some of the music rooms, so we would suggest moving them over here. And this area here, this is new space. So currently, we have a courtyard here, right? The cafeteria is over here, kitchen's back here. This is an existing courtyard. We could fill in a part of this courtyard with a 2-story space and create some new space here, and still have our corridor here to access those spaces. And I think it's a nice flow where you sort of, you get this circular flow here, and then we would, put this corridor back in here. And then potentially, if the music spaces were also used for recital, we could expand this area of public access potentially down here as well. So the other big idea here is relocating the cafeteria and the kitchen. And the opportunity here is that on this end of the building, there is an existing entrance here, which I don't believe it maybe not be used anymore. But there's a great entrance here that, with a little bit of work could be turned into a loading dock, right? So there's a place where we could have an alternative loading space here on the side of the building instead of having it back here. And this end of the building, I believe, in the original design, the 1971 version of the building before the renovations in 2000, basketball courts were here. So this whole area was reconfigured. So this area here in the back is double height. So there's a large volume there, and you might not notice it all because I think there's been some mezzanines that have been built inside here, but with some renovation, you could potentially recapture that big volume and use that as a cafeteria and have glazing here on 2 sides, and I think you'd get great light. It could be a great space. And then the kitchen is immediately adjacent. Serving line could be here, and it pulls things a little bit, closer here to the middle. This area always felt very kind of remote to me, not centrally located. But this is a pretty significant departure. There's a lot of program here. I think that we would displace if we went back to the space needs. Let's see, we want to go.
A lot of locker rooms, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So there would be a big impact here, I think, on athletics. We have some lockers in, is this the wrestling area?
Yeah, the wrestling room is on a different floor, but yes, it's locker rooms would be the big thing. It's
Yep.
also where our shop is for our maintenance department, so we'd have to figure out where our maintenance department's shop goes.
Is that downstairs?
That's downstairs. So that was my other question, is which floor is that cafeteria on? Is it on the, because that backside of the building there is sloped, and so you've got
Yeah. It's
3
on,
floors there.
it's on the main level,
So it's on the
So-
main level, so you'd still keep what was underneath.
correct?
Okay,
So downstairs on the lower level, I believe the shops and are down in this area here, right?
is it problematic for the loading dock that you're on slope there? Because you're going from what would be essentially like a main floor to a basement floor and wanting to make sure that there's enough space. I'm assuming we would just reconfigure the driveway and have a different traffic flow.
So I believe, and I haven't looked at this recently, but I believe there's a retaining wall in this area where the grade changes. The grade in the back of the building is a full story lower than the grade in this area.
Correct.
So, but I believe that there's a retaining wall in this corner where you transition from the higher level grade to the lower level.
Yes.
There definitely is, yeah.
And there was an entrance here. And I think the door opening is still there. It may not be used, but it's still there and it could potentially be opened back up. And then I think that there's some space between the exterior wall and the road where we could potentially, sneak a loading dock in here where a vehicle could pull off out of the drive lane. I think that we would want to study that a little bit more to see if that's really feasible. But the general thinking is that there's potentially some big spaces here that we could create by returning to the original way that the building was configured. It's a potential opportunity. But it does have its challenges, for we need to find new homes for everything else, right? So there's some athletics here that gets displaced. Music, I think we could take care of that by potentially adding some space here. But we could, now this is a continuation of option 2. We go downstairs to the lower level. And here, this is this proposed addition, which would fill in a portion of that courtyard there behind the dining area. We could potentially take some of the shops that are in this area, move them here. And you can load your shops here. Now this becomes an exterior wall. If the cafeteria is gone and the kitchen's gone, this is an exterior wall. We can load all the shops if we need to have some roll-up doors in the shop areas, to bring some materials in. We can do that. And then we can potentially take those athletic functions that we've displaced and move them down to where the shops are currently located now. And then in the middle area, this entire area is the media center. The main the reading room is this space right here, which is the double height space. And this is where we had proposed to locate that black box theater. So the seating level or the audience level would be down at the lower level. So we would have to think about if we were to bring the public, into the theater to see a performance, we'd have to think about how we want to do that, to limit access to the rest of the facility. And then down here, there was some thought about a media arts program, which could be a video production, could be a broadcast studio, web design, a curriculum focused around the media. And the studio, I think we would, if we were to do something like that, we would have to think about, studio has to be very, very quiet. And we would want to think very carefully about where to locate that so that there aren't disturbances around the studio, so that you can do recording and broadcasting without having to worry about noises, coming from adjacent spaces. But So that is option 2. So there's some similar ideas carrying through here with, you know, the commons and grouping of the arts, a performance space here, and then kind of a more aggressive move here, I think, with you know, relocating the cafeteria and kitchen, and potentially getting rid of some extra space, you know, making the building a bit more compact, manageable, and perhaps even less costly to operate. You know, if we're removing spaces that we're not heating and cooling and cleaning and maintaining, in the long term, you know, a smaller footprint should be, you know, less expensive to operate on a square foot, you know, basis.
Patrick and Alan, what do you think about the cafeteria in that area, flow wise? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around all this. I used to be the junior high gym, so I'm trying to, you know.
Yeah.
It's a long way away.
Yeah, it's still a long way away, but I like the fact that the music is closer. So, I mean, there's a trade-off there. Because right now the 7th graders go to music. That's the farthest they have to travel from the middle schools to get over to the music.
I think having the commons area helps in terms of cutting through. I wonder what that looks like. You know, what
that's true too, yeah.
what the pacing on that is. For me, I think one of the things that is challenging with our arts programs, whether it's music, theater, or our traditional arts, is that with how it's set up in the building, students might never walk by and see that unless they're going there for a purpose. And so it makes our arts and theater and music programming much more visible and integrated into the rest of the building. And people will see that on display much more regularly. So I think there's even just like a rub-off effect that more kids will be interested and involved in what's happening in those spaces. Having the cafeteria be the back corner, I mean, I feel like you always end up with a cafeteria in a corner somewhere in a lot of the buildings. Like it's never like the central hub spot in the middle of a building that everything else is built around, because it's usually a noisier space. So I don't know if I mind it there.
And it is closer to the commons area. If you did want to do some satellite dining like we do now, we have carts come up and like breakfast and stuff.
Yep.
So it's easier.
I will say last meeting, we talked about this concept and putting it in that corner, and it felt far away. The addition of the commons, not as a dining commons, but as a connection hub, makes it feel a whole lot closer than it did previously.
Yeah.
I will say, I worry that loading dock, that entry roadway as it exists, and that doesn't mean the roadway couldn't bump 20 feet to the left, but it is a whatever 6-foot swath, 8-foot swath of grass and a sidewalk. So we would definitely have to capture some space to the left of your screen here on that access of the exit roadway.
Yes.
Right, but that I don't think that's super difficult to reconfigure with we have a parking lot currently, and you know, I think we've got more parking space than we truly need with the size of our school. Like we've gone past the point where we need every spot in the lot on a daily basis.
For sure.
So I think we can reconfigure where the road is versus where parking spots are and what we have for space on the campus.
Yeah, and I don't, my goal would at least be, there's no wholesale rethinking of the traffic flow and site. However, right, the entire site needs to be kind of brought up to the 21st century. I mean, we're perpetually re-raising catch basins and things because everything is just sinking. So it needs to be kind of redone. So moving a road 20 feet to the left, if we were having to redo all of the infrastructure anyway, I don't think is huge issue. Kevin, can I ask, the Black Box Theater, it's 2 stories. Just, I'm not understanding what's on the top, like at this level versus what's on the bottom level.
There's nothing on the top level. It's open to the space below. So it's one room.
Okay,
It's one room that occupies the
kind of like the
height.
library now.
Exactly.
Okay.
Imagine the library fully enclosed, no glazing at all.
Just from my background purposes, Brian, I think you need that for lighting.
Into the Black Box Theater.
Mhm.
100%. Yep. No, that makes sense.
For the theatrical lighting. So you need height in order to hang.
Oh, for the lighting. Gotcha.
You need to hang your theatrical lights at the top to light the scene below. So you need some extra height to do that.
Gotcha.
Brian, I got a quick question. We were talking around the loading dock. Is there any zoning restrictions on that side? Are we too close to the property line to widen that out?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly. I don't imagine, John, you know, off the top of your head. There is a property, you know, there's that back lot where kids park, and then a property does jut towards the building. There is still some space there. There's a sidewalk on the right, and there's, you know, some 8 to 10 feet of grass on the left. But I do think we're getting close to property from what I understand to be.
Yeah, we would have to look at that very carefully and see what the setback requirements are. I think it's a residential lot, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's 25 feet,
Close.
so we'd have to go with the zoning if we try to do too much on that side.
Yep.
Would say Newbury's been good to us and reasonable, so.
They have,
Yeah,
but
just
you
looking
never know.
Yeah, that's true.
Just looking at it now, it is pretty close. It would have to be looked at.
Yeah, I was just looking at the aerial.
Yep.
That back of that house, that property line on 6 School Street, it's right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, loading the kitchen is really the big challenge with trying to do anything differently, I think, with the cafeteria. And this was, I think, one of the few, if not only, opportunities at this level of the building to do that. And so it was something that we thought was worthy of exploring.
So the cafeteria, I'm assuming, is in the corner for light, right? You have at
Yep.
least 2 walls of light
and height.
So
Right.
swapping the 2, putting the kitchen in the back and the cafeteria up against the gym would be better for loading, but worse for the cafeteria itself.
No, and the reason why is, you know, earlier we were talking about the grading, and the grade on this side of the building.
Oh, is one lower.
It's
Gotcha.
a
That's
full
right.
story lower than it is here,
Gotcha.
so
Yeah.
you would not be able to load the kitchen.
Gotcha.
And then your cafeteria would have glazing on only one side. I think that would not be a very, you know, attractive space to be in. You get there's a lot more wall space here available for glazing. We'd have to open it up. I don't believe there are any windows in it right now, because originally it was a gymnasium.
Right.
Brian, the only thing I could think of is if they back down parallel, they did our turnaround where the upper parking lot is, we could do a rotary or some kind of way for turn around there, and then back down parallel with the building and have the loading dock jet out right there, so they could back up to the loading dock, and it would just have to go in that way.
Yeah.
Because you would have the space.
I was gonna say, if you did that, you could move the parking to where the cafeteria used to be, maybe. If we had to.
Yeah.
You certainly could, yeah.
And height-wise, you couldn't put the cafeteria on the bottom floor of the library and then put the stuff above it, right? The stuff on the first option? So if you put the cafeteria where the multi-purpose room is and then add an addition for the kitchen.
Here,
Yeah. You don't have enough height though, do you?
you,
For 2 stories there for if it's a cafeteria?
well, I think if we built, you know, these shops, we wouldn't have the height. I think in a large assembly space like a cafeteria, you really want to have a high, you know, ceiling. But I think that if you did that and put the kitchen here, you know, I don't know if you'd have any natural light at this level. I suppose you could put a clear story up above here, but it wouldn't be a lot. Wouldn't be a lot of light. I think it might feel a little, you know, more like cave-like without, you know, a lot of daylight. There's some nice daylight that comes in, you know, through this because there's a fair amount of glass in the existing dining room.
You also want high ceilings for smell.
Yeah.
Truth.
So it's a lot of bodies and a lot of smell coming out of the kitchen.
Mhm.
So what if you
Christine, I'm sure you
incorporated-
remember the smells of the cafeteria.
Patrick, that was probably the most PC way you could ever have said that.
So again, these don't have to be mutually exclusive concepts, right? You're playing with the idea of moving the cafeteria in option 2. I would say I personally I feel like the black box theater is a nice to have. I like the idea of having the workspace attached to the back of the theater. I've heard that from our theater department, from any performing group, having ability to run, choral risers and move the band in. So all of that. And as well as there's been outside groups who have come in and said, my gosh, if we had better loading and air conditioning, we would love to rent the space from you. So I think both internally and externally, that workshop, I forget the exact term you used for it, is a better use of that space and having it on 2 levels. That's a personal preference, but I actually like, the more time goes on, the more I like the idea of the cafeteria in the back. I think it helps solve some problems with that shared commons.
So what if we took the 2 options and kind of put them together, the cafeteria in the corner and then the
Yeah.
rest of option 1?
It's perfectly fine to take ideas from one and combine it with ideas from another. Absolutely.
Do you have any rough numbers?
Costs?
Yeah.
No.
'Cause that's going to be the biggest factor,
It's-
obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're a little bit early in the process, but you know, I think the commons, I think, could be fairly costly depending on how much, you know, area we would choose to capture. You know, this option is more modest, but still a very generous amount of space. And I think could function as equally well. It's just not pushed right out here to the edge, and it does leave some outdoor space for a courtyard. But you know, there's some cost here. You know, repurposing rooms that already exist for other things is less costly because this space exists. It's already built. You know, turning a room into an art room, you know, we would have to add sinks and, you know, whatever other equipment was required to do that. But, and then the other big expensive move would be doing this, moving the cafeteria and the kitchen.
Personal preference, I would rather spend the money, and others please disagree, making that commons more of a central hub and capturing the space so it can be a central location, a central entry location, I should say, is a higher priority than relocating the cafeteria, because I'm guessing right here the money is spent on the commons and reworking that entire entry And then the other big piece, like you said, of relocating an entire kitchen.
Mhm.
I would say the money is better spent figuring out access and streamlining access.
I think there are a lot of operational and circulation advantages to having this commons, and we've discussed all of it. Is there a real tangible benefit, to doing this? I mean, I suppose it's a bit closer to some areas, and other areas it's further away. I mean, if you're down here and you're going to the cap, that's quite a walk. This is quite a walk too, but that's even longer. But I would agree with you, Brian. I think that the dollars, I think there's a lot of benefit in spending dollars here as opposed to this.
I'd agree with you, Brian. I'd rather spend the money on the commons.
Brian, I agree as well. Having spent a lot of time on that campus over many years, I agree with what you said, Brian.
I guess I would agree too. Two thoughts though. I think we've lost in this model here, I think we've lost the corridor again to get access to the middle school. So I think having a bigger commons, if that includes a corridor, to get us back that access back there, that's definitely preferable. The one advantage I do see of moving the cafeteria up into that wing is security purposes. It's really hard to lock down the building right now and have outside groups have access to all those facilities, I think. By moving the cafeteria up there, you give yourself a much more sequestered area that would be, I think, easier to lock down, to not have access into the quote unquote academic and admin spaces. I don't know what you call the rest of that, but
yeah,
I agree.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the question, is that a benefit enough to warrant the lock stock? So is it a safe assumption, Kevin, to say, as a general rule, when we're building a building, renovating a building, the access control like we have at Pine Grove, where through mag locks and fire doors and entry at the end of corridors, we would have much more of an ability to section off corridors, academic areas, just by the nature of adding doors and hardware and technology.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
it's the configuration or the arrangement of spaces and the doors and the access control together. That's how it's managed. And, this purple line here is, a potential boundary where those access control points can happen. So in this example, the commons is within that boundary. This probably wouldn't go behind the admin offices. It would really do this. So that's not quite right. But it would need to include things like back here, you might wonder, well, why would we provide access there? And the reason why is because the auditorium has a high occupant count, and we need to provide multiple means of egress out of the auditorium, even if a spectator never ever uses the back door. It has to be there and it has to be available. So that was the reason why we extended it here. But that boundary would include the gymnasiums, the auditorium, the commons. It would give you access to administrative areas where it's needed, for a parent or anybody that needs to visit the offices. And in this game, it could potentially include the cafeteria as well, if that were to be used for an after hours, event that required food service. But you could also just close it off right here and not have access to the cafeteria. But I think, with the door hardware and the access control devices, it's a fairly manageable thing, to do. And that concept, I think, applies to both of these. You know, in this version, it's a bit more compact. But the general idea is to, you know, what are the parts of the program that we really want to access off hours, or, you know, for members of the public who are there during school hours, and then group those functions around that perimeter, and everything else is off limits.
Kevin, is there any benefit to, in this model where we're moving the cafeteria up, to being able to have more consistent roof lines and to having the, like, I'm just thinking of our roof. I feel like we've got about 6 or 7 different levels on the roof. And at each of those break points are areas typically where we see water coming in and water
Oh, yeah.
infiltration. So like, is moving the cafeteria up, does it give us benefit aside from having fewer square footage of, or less square footage of roof? Does it give us any other benefit in terms of the roofing in this building?
Other than having less roof area to manage and have potential leaks, I would say no. I am very familiar with this roof, and it does have many different, you know, levels and edges and lots of opportunities for leaks. Changing that is a structural intervention, which means that you're removing roof structure and rebuilding roof structure. Very costly. That would add a lot of cost, I think, to our project. We would want to think about that very carefully if there's, you know, that's the benefit that we really want.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, is it helpful for us to say, okay, what we like out of each of the designs to give you a sense of
Yeah.
Like I can say I like the first design overall better. Including the way you've got the workshop, the theater, whatever that is, plus the maker's place, plus the downstairs, you've got 2 levels of use of that space.
Yeah.
I like the one better. What I like out of number 2 is the cafeteria in the back, which I think is problematic overall. And I like the fact that we're just knocking out the what do you call it? Locker rooms entirely and starting from scratch, because I think those locker rooms need to be incinerated to get rid of all of the years of history, shall we say, another politically correct way of saying the stank. So
Brian, the ones that are getting knocked out though aren't the worst ones. So the ones getting knocked out are on the 2nd floor and on the 3rd floor, not the ones on the 1st floor that are in the worst shape.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think we're talking about
But we should also be knocking those ones on the 1st floor.
Let's get rid of those 2.
right. So on the 1st floor, I think we're talking about this area here.
Yes.
Yes.
And then on the main level upstairs, it's these spaces in here. So our relocated cafeteria idea is this area right here. So, you know, we would have a new home for the music spaces and these athletic spaces that are getting displaced. And we did accommodate that, I think, in that option. So yeah, here, and then if we go downstairs, we had made a shift here to repurpose the shops for athletics. And then we had a small addition here in the courtyard for new shops and labs that had direct access to the outside. That was the thinking there. And then music was upstairs, you know, keeping it within that ring, that arts ring, you know, that we've been talking about. And Patrick, I think I don't know, it was you who made a comment about having those rooms visible to the rest of the the students, that, you know, that provides a benefit to everybody to see, you know, the creative work, the good work that's happening in your school.
Absolutely.
That's an idea I really like, and, you know, you can even put, you know, some extra glazing, you know, in the corridor to see, you know, as you're passing by what's going on, especially in a place like a maker's lab or a technology lab where kind of cool stuff is happening, you know, with robotics or, you know, video productions and anything.
Absolutely.
So, Brian, you've expressed some preferences, but what about others? If we were to make another pass at this, what would it be? And is there something else we haven't looked at that we should?
Looking at the map you're looking at right now, the cafeteria, loading dock, kitchen area, was that previously a gym?
Yes.
Is that my understanding?
Yeah, I think in the original construction, it was a gym, and we do have the drawings that show that. There were basketball courts in there.
Right, so I'm just looking at the high school gym right now being in the front, and I think the idea we originally talked about with a cafeteria, kitchen in the front by the commons. Is it too crazy to think about flipping that? Like cafeteria, kitchen, loading dock with a high school gym is.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. So, you know, that's playing the shell game of moving stuff around on the board. But I mean, I think your gymnasium facilities, I know that they need some attention, but I think that they're in fairly good condition, and more importantly, they're the right size.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't capture as much area back here as you have here. So I think, I don't know if I would see a real benefit to doing that. I'd probably stick with what you have.
Your technical corner is so far from us.
I'm sorry, John, I'm losing your
No, I
audio.
was just thinking about the cafeteria being far, like that location being too far for the middle school, like in that far corner of the high school, I mean, of the middle school.
Yes, yep, it's a bit of a walk.
I do like that idea, and I think if we were, the space may be prohibitive, but if we were redesigning it from scratch, I
Yeah.
agree, the cafeteria right at the front.
Yep.
And then the two gyms stacked back to back, going backwards would make a whole lot of sense.
Would.
Other people?
I'm partial to option one, but I do like the cafeteria in the back corner there. I don't know how necessary the black box theater is. And I do like the idea of getting rid of the outbuilding cafeteria.
So a bit of option 1 and 2.
Yeah, but it's again going to come down to cost.
Yep.
That's what I was gonna say as well. I like option 1, I like portions of option 2, but again, I think a lot of it is going to come down to money.
So again, the idea, when we're talking, we're gonna eventually arrive at costs. These are, again, big block, big picture. This is never going to be designed to the point where we're going to have an actual kind of schematic budget. But I think what's helpful is to design what we feel like would be an acceptable alternative, and then have Kevin go through that exercise of kind of high level costing it out. And if it's prohibitive, then, I mean, then we know, right, the only real solution is with the MSBA, or if it's in the ballpark, then we could then kind of reverse engineer and say, what wouldn't we be able to do? Because this could all be cost prohibitive in the end without the MSBA partnership.
The other
Yeah.
challenge we'll have with this option is if you move the calf back there, is just looking at the maps though too, it's just realistically, I'm not sure how much land you can reclaim on the left side there to realistically make it feasible to put the loading dock in there where it's in there quite often for deliveries.
Yeah,
I think that's a challenge.
yeah, if we would maybe have to think about taking some of that parking area, you know, for a bypass or something. But you're right, you know, we would have to do some redesign in that area, I think, to make that loading dock practical.
And again, could be cost prohibitive out the gate and structurally prohibitive, but if to the left of the high school gym, we own the land all the way up and through the parking lot.
Yeah.
So if the cafeteria was on the front, we would have the ability to put a traditional loading dock right behind and then reroute traffic right around that whole thing. And wouldn't have to deal with that lot line. That makes sense?
Yeah, because I think the property turns the
Right there, yep.
here.
Yeah, it's right about there.
Yeah. Yep.
Kevin, one of the things that you said that stuck out to me, and I like option one better, but I do like the cafeteria move in option two. But in option two, the slightly contracted common area, I do think there's benefit to having the common area that abuts the middle school going all the way down to almost the front. And yeah, so bring that down further so that there is that entryway that Narissa talked about right there, going directly into the middle school out of the commons. Like, I think there could be a
right there.
a benefit to still having space in the front where you're not right up against the sidewalk, but bringing that corner of the common area down so that there's an entryway into.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe it's something as simple as you know, doing something like that.
Exactly.
So your secure access point is here. And then you have your direct access into the middle school here, and then your commons is back here. And then this area here
It's still open space.
it's still your outdoor, you know, gathering space, which is, I like, that's quite nice. I like that.
I think that also gives you access to bathrooms right off the commons too, which is important, I think, for visitors.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I got a quick question. Will we be losing the wrestling room? I have some concern with this design with our athletics department.
Yeah, I think we would need to find a home for, you know, whatever it is that we're displacing, assuming that it's something we want to keep it, you know, in the program. So, but I think in this option here, we would go downstairs and use this space here on the lower level for wrestling.
Will we still have the wrestling room though? Because that's one of the big reasons why we're so successful at wrestling.
You'll have to remind me where the wrestling room is. Is it here?
Yeah,
It's
it's where
right
the
under
loading
loading
dock
dock.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the space that's captured downstairs, that's also our 18 to 22 program. So like some of those spaces that are recaptured for athletics downstairs, that's our shop in our 18 to 22 program. Or it's our shop. It's our shop spaces here where athletics is reclaiming.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and so that shop would be moving into the middle space in the building. You know, yeah, it's using those spaces differently.
Well, tell me more about wrestling.
Our wrestling program has been really successful for a long time. It's probably one of, if not our strongest sport. And they've got a wrestling room there on the backside. I've got issues with the wrestling room in terms of and our weight room would be taken out of that version as well. So we'd have to figure out where that's going to. I think that would go downstairs, but one of my issues with the wrestling room currently is that it's got poor ventilation and the ceiling height is too low. So moving it downstairs actually would probably provide it with better ventilation and light, and you know, because right now it's kind of, Mike, it's kind of it's a square box that's got no airflow.
I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. I just was,
Yeah.
I mean, all these plans, I know Triton's moving to a lot of arts, but it seems like we're really extremely displacing all our athletic programs on all the plans. I have concerns with that.
Is this the wrestling room right here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the wrestling room and weight room and then storage in between. Mike,
Okay.
I'm not sure it's a problem if the wrestling room moves downstairs, basically next to where their locker room is, right? So the locker room that the wrestling team uses is right on the corner. So
Yep.
to your right, so it's right on the corner there. Across from one of those red spaces, you know, you're actually easier for practice sense if you're there.
Yeah, I with all this media and everything changing, what is gonna go on with their the detached building with we have now? Could we take that and make that all into athletics since most of all the media and all the arts are going into the main building?
It's really just the TV production class that's coming in. So out there now, we also have a social studies class, and ideally I'd want to move that back inside, although the teacher that's out there is doing some really amazing work with indoor outdoor spaces, and there's also the teacher that's got our B program going.
Yeah.
You know, and then we have our adventure education room. So for the adventure education room, we have a lot of our equipment that goes to our high and low ropes courses stored out there. So
Yeah.
it'd be one of the three classes for sure moving back into the building, maybe two of the three classes moving back into the building. There's a lot we could do with that space. I personally like the idea of having some of that turn into locker rooms where we're not sending teams into the building, where we set them up right next to the field most of the year. Like, I think there'd be a lot of benefit to that.
Yes.
Maybe even having one of those spaces turn into a film room for our athletes. Like, I think that could be great.
Yep.
Because we're constantly looking for classrooms for people to do film in, and teachers don't want them coming into their classroom because they don't take off their cleats, and then their classroom's left a mess. So like, I think there's things we could do with that outdoor space differently.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
we-
just want to make sure we don't forget the athletes because we have a lot of great athletes that go to the school too. So.
That's a good point, Mike. And I would say this, right? So I think for this, this exercise, what we need to do is identify, again, Kevin used the term big box, right? Or big block. So what are the big things we're moving around? Setting up a wrestling room that is largely just mats, or a team room or a weight room that's largely a room that was about the equipment you put in. That would be all refined way down the road once we just, we actually chose a design and kind of started to work with it. This is to get a sense of, can this building address our needs and kind of put those big blocks in place, and then say, Kevin, okay, this makes sense. This would be something we would like and work with and give us a high level cost. Is it, 100 million, 500 million? And then, to determine whether it's even feasible. All of that, your concerns and questions, totally appropriate, and part of this discussion would be addressed if we said, okay, we're going to go non-MSBA, and here are the needs we need to address, and then we work it through there.
But Mike, where this is now, like, you also are, like, you could have a weight room there, a wrestling room, and a multi-purpose athletic room as those three red spaces. Right across the hall is also where the athletic trainer's office is. So like, that makes a lot of sense to have closer proximity to the weight room and a wrestling room for where the athletic trainer would be. And also a multi-purpose space. Like, if you see a lot of the new schools and gym facilities, they're putting in like turf floors in some of those spaces so that they can do some indoor training. And when they're doing some plyometrics or calisthenics, they're not pounding on the legs in the same way. That space, I think, could get set up well for that purpose.
Okay. I trust you guys. I just want to check and verify. That's all.
Absolutely.
What one of the other ideas too is if we were able to open up, some of these walls, I can imagine a glass roll up, garage type door, where it's warm enough. You can open up one of those doors and all of that ventilation issue, really help to vent it out and provide extra air. But we could develop a little area, to extend the program, to the outdoor space when the weather would, allow it. I mean, we've worked on some athletic facilities where we've done that concept with the roll up doors. I mean, it looks almost like a shop, but it's for athletics, and it's been very popular.
Kevin, we actually at one point did have garage doors there when there was auto mechanic stuff going on. So there's already a structure and a framework for that.
Yep.
I was actually going to say that, Patrick. That was Mr. Spicer's class.
Yeah.
So quick question. So for option 2, we have to build roughly a 10,000 square foot addition off of the library.
Option 2, yes.
That right there, yeah, that's roughly 10,000.
Yeah, this area here would be a 2-story addition, and I'm just trying to guess as to the size of it, but I know
5,100 square feet of floor, roughly.
Did you scale this out?
I did it off at Google, but so it's probably not 100% accurate, but pretty close. So
Yeah.
we're looking at like 10,000 square feet. That's going to be pretty expensive.
I'm trying to see how big the cafeteria was. 8,000. So it might be smaller than that. I think this
So
says
the cafeteria is 8,000, but it looks like the kitchen's another 8,000 as well, because that whole building is 16,000.
Yeah, I think the kitchen and the cafeteria are roughly the same size.
Yeah, they're 16,000.
I'm sorry, I'm flipping around here. Yeah, so this area would be 8,000. So we were talking about filling in that much. So that might be 6,000.
2 stories at
floor, right?
6,000, so 12
Two
total.
stories, so 12, maybe 13,000, 14,000, something like that.
And what's the average these days
1,000
per square foot?
We talk a lot about $1,000 a square foot, and for a small addition like that, I think you definitely would be at the high end of that range.
So roughly 14 million.
Yes. It's hard. I know it's hard to imagine, but that's where we're at.
I don't see it.
Yeah, I think again, that right. And if I'm understanding the option 1 and 2, I would rather not have to add that on, even if we were losing the cafeteria, and have I think we were capturing those same needs in 2 stories where the black box theater is, right? That workroom and a makerspace on the first floor, and then underneath. So.
Yeah.
So
are you suggesting instead of?
I think I like the option 1 layout for where the black box theater is.
Yeah, I think we need to give up on moving the cafeteria.
Okay.
Too expensive.
So option 1 though, but with the black box theater, right?
No, option 1 as it is. Maybe make the commons a little smaller.
Yeah, I like the scene shop maker space, and then the lower story use of the space better than use the studio and those spaces better than capturing all of that for a 2-story black box theater.
Got it.
And so as a general rule, it's safe to say renovating the cafeteria where it is, square footage wise, kitchen, all the utilities, as you mentioned, is no questions asked, more cost effective than rebuilding the space from the ground up.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the route we need to go, unfortunately.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think we need to take
It's
that off
not,
the
it's
table.
not unfortunate. It's not unfortunate. That's.
No, I'd like to be able to redesign how we use the school, but we just
Sure.
don't have that budget.
Yeah.
So we have to go as economic as possible.
Yep.
Yeah, and then the one other thing I would say in a kind of version 2.0 that we'll get to look at again next time is really rethinking that entry courtyard and what do you call it again, the commons, to find a way to bring direct access to the high school, to the middle school, and then even if the district office, kind of that second half of the admin space, could somehow be directly accessible. So you come through security and you're into that commons. And then, like, again, while we're unloading buses, they're all coming in together, and middle schools are peeling off to the middle school and high schools to the high school, whether that's inside or outside. But I think that single point of access and entry for security, and then being able from that commons to be able to get into the district office, the high school and the middle school. And I love the idea of we've always said, well, let's just put the central office out in the outbuilding. I love the idea of keeping us in the building, but directly accessible, and utilizing the outbuilding for more programming space, whether that be, obviously, athletics is a prime target, given the fact that it's in the middle of the fields and stadium, or Outward Bound or whatever it is. That makes a lot of sense.
So I guess my direction would be to continue with option one, maybe look at scaling back the commons a little just for cost and getting all the things that we just discussed.
Sorry, my dogs are going crazy, but is there any chance that we can just like schedule another meeting soon? I just feel like we've seen a lot today, and I want to let my brain simmer on it, because I don't feel like I can say at this point, like, give you anything more than a gut reaction.
Or I guess, Kevin, this would be about Kevin, your thought process. Does it make sense to come back with a couple other options, right? We've given Kevin a lot of information today, and he comes up with some thinking. I mean, I think we were fairly aligned with kind of some big things. Do you have enough, Kevin, to kind of go back and kind of another iteration here?
Yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that would be good too.
Sorry.
I guess I'm not ready to say no to, an addition, say no to not moving stuff. I feel like there's some spaces that I didn't, hear people sold on in some of these plans, which means there's still some flexibility within them. And I guess that's where I'm getting lost, is my brain. It's hard to concentrate on what everyone's saying and what Kevin's sort of showing us, and at the same time be thinking to myself, like, how does this work? Where is that going? I feel like I need a little time to digest.
Yeah, I think, well, we'll send you what we've shown today, right? So, Brian, I'll send it to you, and you
Yep,
can.
and I can share with the group for sure.
So you can just distribute that to the group, and everybody will have it, and you can look at it on your own, and you might have some other thoughts, observations, questions, whatever reactions that you have. And then in the meantime, I think what we can do is push option one a little bit more, trying to incorporate the comments and suggestions that I heard today. That's not a big effort, and I think we can turn that around relatively quickly and get it back to this group. And I don't know if we would need to schedule a meeting right now, but I would just send it right back to the group, and the group can look at it, and then we can talk about it, because I think it's good for the group to preview things maybe before. And I think, this time, I think we have a chance to do that, where we can do another iteration of this option one and get it to the group relatively quickly, and then you can spend some time with it. And the next time we get back together, you might have some other thoughts, Narissa, that, maybe today was an overload, or, overwhelming.
One of the things that I feel like, and I know this was about Brian, moving the big items into different spaces and configuration, but
Yep.
we talked almost not at all about how the academic side of the building functions. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that our primary purpose is some of that academic side, and there are ways that side of the building doesn't function well now. And so even thinking about, I know I talked about adjusting sizes of classrooms and reusing spaces in different ways, but thinking about, do we recapture some of those courtyards and make learning pods, or do different types of things in some of those spaces? Like there's, I think ways to configure that half of the building that would fundamentally change the way teaching and learning happens. And I don't want to lose sight of that as being a primary need in a building renovation as well.
For sure. I guess the only thing my thinking, and correct if I'm wrong, Kevin, right? A lot of that, what you just described, Patrick, right? It's the reason we're here, right? Is instruction in general. Those are going to be much smaller cost changes, right? We had said, we're not going to look to, we talked last time about right sizing classrooms. Ours are in the 700s. MSBA said they should be in the 800s. We're not going to try and in general increase the classroom spaces by 100 square feet because it's cost prohibitive. But that doesn't mean capturing 2 classroom spaces to make I'm going to say an extended learning area, or right sizing the science labs. My guess is science labs, the big cost is the equipment. It's not whether we, capture 2 science labs to make it one full one. There's some cost there. I would rather spend, and again, we have a limited budget with Kevin to get to the point. I want to make sure we get to the point where we have a concept of have we moved all the big things and addressed all the big questions, and we have a sense of what that's going to cost. Because if it's $400 million, right, we're dead on arrival. And at best, we're partnering with the MSBA to decide how to partner moving forward. So I agree with you 100%. And maybe that's a question for Kevin is, do you believe we largely, I think we're talking tens of millions in repurposing spaces in big block designs. Whereas classrooms, the use of those spaces, the layout is more about the fit and the finishes discussion than it is about, where we put a 8,000 square foot cafeteria or entry space.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, we have to start this process at a high altitude. But the teaching spaces are much smaller, and on a cost per square foot basis, cost significantly less to renovate. So in an iterative process, we start at the high altitude and we get closer and closer, and we start looking at things in more detail. But I think that there's enough room in what we're doing to make a fair assumption about, costs for renovating, core academic spaces and teaching spaces. The harder stuff is the big stuff, the 10,000 square foot and above type areas. So I think that's about right, Brian.
But valid to raise, Patrick, right? I mean, that has to be, absolutely has to be.
Well, it's if we do if we do the others and don't end up touching the classroom spaces enough, the
Yeah.
building is not gonna function how it needs to function going forward or be successful, and we're gonna end up in the same conundrum that we are in now, which is that we
Absolutely.
renovated half the building and the renovation didn't give us what was needed and leaves us with, parts of the building that don't work right.
You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. And, we haven't mentioned it today because we talked about it at length before, but, there's the basic infrastructure needs of the facility. Have costs associated with that too. Roof
Kevin,
storage,
the one other thing that I'm thinking, sorry to keep us dragging on, but is if we're reconfiguring where the middle school office goes and the whole entryway, it also leaves us with that giant foyer that is the middle school foyer. That's a lot of square footage. And whether that turns into classrooms, whether that turns into some type of multi-purpose space, whether you have something on the first floor and something else on the second floor there's a tremendous amount of square footage there that we could find some interesting usage for that would probably be great for whether that stays all middle school programming, whether that's shared programming, like thinking about library spaces, like that could be a really good space for some of that.
Sure, absolutely. We're
But
talking
it's a
about
lot
this
of square
area
footage.
right here, Patrick.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's both there and on the second floor above it.
Right.
So you've got two spaces like that, and on the first floor that runs right up against our English classes. So like if that ends up being library space, I know our English department would probably be thrilled because it's right next door. If we're creating a shared library space, or I think that could be really cool.
Al, he's already stealing your space.
I was gonna say, I don't have much left to give. You already have a lot.
So I would love Patrick and Al's thoughts on, like, we were talking about bringing all of the administrative space down to the I want to call it a courtyard, the commons, right? Is that workable? Does that make sense to the both of you to relocate those spaces and have one central kind of administrative area?
That makes perfect sense, I think, especially if that's going to be the one area of access to the building.
Yeah.
Again, people come in, they can go middle school office, high school office, central office, depending on where they need to go. It's all one spot. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then it gives you a lot more space, even off the foyer, because now you have the middle school administrative offices are now, what are we gonna do with that? So.
Yeah, you could trade two of the middle school classes down right off of the commons and put them where the office is now and get middle school office space. Right. And then I was thinking even where the current entry is to the middle school, Kevin, that's like a big step up. It's the first steps you see as you're driving on campus. That could be kind of, it's elevated, keep it elevated, rail it off, and there could be an outdoor space. Could be an outdoor learning area for the middle school. It could be outdoor seating area for, you name it.
Could be an outdoor eating area for staff.
Right.
Like,
it could
we could create a staff wellness area out there. Like there's a lot to do.
Yeah. But I like the idea of making that disappears as an entrance, right? It's already got, canopy or, two-story glazing. So it's already got the space there. That could be a great area, but I love the idea of making that no longer and very clearly and obviously not an entry point anymore.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
All right. So, it's already 12. So does it make sense then, Kevin, you said, fairly short turnaround, 2 weeks, 1 week?
I think within 2 weeks, I'll try to do better than that. I think we can get you another iteration of this. And then, we might, do we want to try to schedule a follow-up meeting now, or?
I was going to say, I'd love to get something on the books.
Yeah.
When we had originally put dates on the calendar, we had we had blocked out, we've got a date of October 11th on there. And again, it's been some changes and stuff, so I don't want to assume that that's all perfect, but 1, 2, 3, it's 4 weeks from today. So, is that right? Did I lie? Yeah, so that was a date we had talked about. We could, if we want to keep that, that gives us, we can certainly send information. This is an open meeting of a public body for the school committee. But when Kevin gets those kind of version 3 to me, I can send that out to this whole group. We obviously can't discuss it. That gives people a couple of weeks to kind of let that bake and think through what we like, what we don't like, what's it missing. And does that make sense to get that in a couple of weeks, give people a couple more weeks to think, and then meet on the 11th of, did I say that right? Yeah, meet on the 11th of October.
That works for me.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Logistically, it works for me. I just wonder if, I mean, that gives us really 2 more meetings before we would probably have some sort of a response from the MSBA. I just wonder if that's enough meeting,
Yeah.
like, I'm just wondering, if it's a refining process,
Mhm.
does 2 meetings do it, or would we be advised to try and work in maybe 1 more just to have some leeway?
Yeah.
I don't think we want to be rushed at the end. We want to come out of this process fairly confident that we have a workable plan B. I'm just not sure we can get there in 2 meetings.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Fair question. I mean, how quickly would you want to meet again? End of September, so 2 weeks is the 27th of September, October 4th. It's 3 weeks. If we keep looking at Fridays, doesn't have to be a Friday. That's not, I mean, we're not married to Fridays.
The 27th works for me.
Say it again, Matt. I'm sorry, I cut off.
I'm sorry, the 27th works for me.
Yeah,
Works for me too also.
Same here.
Yeah, I unfortunately would not be available on that day, but.
Okay. Could
it's-
we, if we went the following week, could we meet earlier in the week? I'm like tied up all day on the 4th, but could we meet another day that week? So if we said Kevin would have to us by the 27th, that's 2 weeks from today, he would have this, what we're calling it, version 2.0
Yeah.
or 2 plus or 1 plus, and then meet sometime the week of the 30th, the front end of the week, the 30th, the 1st, the 2nd of October.
Yeah, that works for me. October 1st would be a good day for me to meet.
Could we do October 1st at 10 a.m.? Or
I
we
can
could
do
meet
that.
earlier, 9 a.m. if people would rather start a little earlier.
If we could go earlier, it'd be better for me because we're running into lunch. I need to be out there to help out with that.
Yeah, I'm generally not available before 9:30.
Okay.
9:30 on the 1st could work for me.
All right. So I feel like a auctioneer here, 9:30 on the 1st. I'm not the first, going once, going twice.
I
So
can do
9
9:30 on the 1st.
I can
9:30.
do 9:30 on the 1st.
All right. 9:30, October 1st. We have a plan.
Yep, and you'll see something from us, before that.
Okay. All right.
Brian, are we doing Friday the 27th?
Of September?
Yeah.
No, I had just thrown that as an idea. So we'll technically on the books was October 11th. We're gonna move that, and again, this was not formally planned, but we had just blocked out dates. We're gonna move the Friday the 11th back to Tuesday the 1st at 9:30 a.m. We'll adjust that invite, and that invite will include the Zoom link on it again. Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you all. Appreciate the brain
Thank you.
trust here, and
Good
you have to
discussion.
call your meeting to order. I'm sorry. It's a bit-
Get a motion to adjourn. Second, roll call vote, Narissa.
Oh yeah, I'm in favor.
I'm a yes as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Anybody?
Weekend.
Bye.
Great weekend.